Story 1. 2 glitches involving my sister. The first one happened maybe 5 years ago. I was sleeping in my bed when my body was inclined to wake up. I opened my eyes and my sister was staring at me, only a few inches away from my face. It was startling, but I wasn't scared. I said, "Hello?" But she didn't respond. She just left my room with my door open. Now, I have to quickly explain the layout of the floor I was on for this to make sense. My bedroom is on the top floor, and from the perspective of my room, to the left are stairs leading down to the main floor, and to the right is the door to the bathroom, which I have a pretty clear view of. So, my sister left my room and went down the stairs. I'm not much of a morning person, so I lied in the bed a bit longer, but kept my eyes open. I just stared outside my door, willing myself to get up. Then, the bathroom door swung open, and my sister walked out. I was completely shocked. She didn't walk back up the stairs to use the bathroom. I would have seen her. Those stairs are the only way to access the floor I was on. I asked her if she'd been in my room a few minutes earlier, and she denied it. I'd be tempted to blame this on the effects of sleep, but I was, and still am, terrified to sleep with my door open, so I always closed it before going to bed. If I truly did dream of my sister entering my room, I have no idea how my door opened. The second incident was just 2 years ago. I was applying mascara in my room in front of my mirror when I dropped it. I looked around for a bit, but I couldn't find it. I thought it was odd because my room was fairly small and there weren't many places for it to hide, but I wasn't surprised with myself. I can be very clumsy and airheaded. I went to go wash off my one eye of mascara. If I couldn't find the tube, I didn't want to head off to school with just one eye done. In the bathroom, when my sister exited her room. Our rooms are just a foot apart, so our encounter was pretty immediate relative to the time of me dropping the mascara. She asked if I've been in her room, and I denied it. Then she held out my mascara tube I just dropped. I took it and asked how she found it, and she told me she just found it on her floor and went to return it to me. I was amazed and told her how I just dropped it in my room, and she too laughed with disbelief, with my one eye of mascara as proof. We now joke that our rooms share a wormhole, although that's the only experiences we have with it. Story 2. First post, so here it goes. October 18th, 2008 was a Sunday. I was in 11th grade, and up to the normal activities that teenagers my age would be up to. I had gone to a party the night before and came home around 2 a.m. I was tossing and turning all night. Finally, around 4:30 a.m. I said screw it and went downstairs to watch TV. To my surprise, I see my dad on the couch reading the newspaper. My dad served 30 years in the military and he woke up early for work every day, but this was a Saturday, so it was a little abnormal. And I thought nothing of it at the time. My dad says, "Hey, bub, what are you doing up so early?" I tell him I couldn't sleep, and he says something along the lines of, "Yeah, me neither." He suggests that we go out to breakfast, and I agree. We waited a few hours and decided to go to Bob Evans. The last time we had been to a breakfast together was when my sister Christy had visited from Oklahoma about a year earlier, at Bob Evans. Once we get there, our waitress introduced herself, and her name was also Christy. Wow, what are the chances? My dad and I had a good chuckle and informed the waitress Christy that the last time we'd been out to breakfast was the year before in the same location with Christy. Me and my dad had a nice little breakfast, and upon arriving home, there were like 10 butterflies in my mom's garden, which is cool to begin with, but even cooler considering Christy loved butterflies and had a butterfly tattooed on her ankle. And after being home for an hour or two, I was in my computer room downloading an Eminem CD. I heard the phone ring, and I was normally really proactive about answering it, but on this occasion, I let it ring. My dad picked it up, and the next thing I hear him say is, "John!" And I immediately said, "What happened to Christy?" It turns out, she'd passed away around 4 that morning, and I just knew it once my dad said my name. Not sure if this is a glitch, a coincidence, or what, but there's my story of the unexplainable. Story 3. So, I just woke up from one of those dead sleeps, and I was having one of those movie-length, vivid-as-fuck dreams, you know? The ones that feel insanely real. So it starts off that I'm suddenly living back in about 2008 in an old house with an old girlfriend in the old suburb we used to live in. Obviously, this weirds me out because I say to my ex in my dream something like, "Hold on, why am I here? You and I broke up and I moved away. I live in... now. I'm seeing someone else and we live together." And then she says something like, "Not this again. We've been through this, sweetie. You're sick. You made this up all in your head. It isn't real, remember?" Now, obviously, I fight the suggestion because I know where I live and what year I live in. So my ex-girlfriend then invites my mom over to the house, still in my dream, and a psychologist, and they both convince and remind me that I'm crazy, and I've been receiving treatment for a while now for repeatedly thinking that I live in a future that I made up in my head with a new girlfriend, a new house, and an entire alternate reality. So, this starts to really fuck me up because now my mom is involved and she's sitting right in front of me, telling me I'm insane, have been for a while, and that I made up a pretend future that I live in my head. Now I know that no one reading this knows my mother, but my mom would never joke about something like this with me, so if she's saying it, then I believe her. So after what must be days or weeks, you know how time distorts in dreams, I guess I start to accept my reality. The future isn't real. I made it up. My new house and girlfriend aren't real. I made them up too. And above all, I'm crazy. I believe that. And then something really messed up happens. I start to get a headache in my dream, and I tell my girlfriend in my dream that I'm going to lie down, and she says, "You shouldn't go to sleep if you've got a headache. You know that makes your delusions worse." But my headache is bad, so I go to bed anyway. And then I wake up. For real, I wake up. Now, I literally woke up 20 minutes ago and spent the first 2 or 3 minutes sitting on the edge of my bed convinced that nothing was real. I've woken up in my fantasy life, right? Like they convinced me it was. In a future that doesn't exist, in a house that doesn't exist, with the girlfriend I made up. I can't entertain this fantasy. It's not real. I poked my sleeping girlfriend in the belly a few times. I walked around my new house, all of which I was amazed at how real it looked. Seriously, that's what I've been doing for the past 10 minutes, being amazed at how real this looks. If anyone was outside my window watching me, I must have looked like a mental patient floating around my house, touching walls and looking at shit. It's only now, about 20 minutes since I woke up, that I'm sitting in my kitchen and it's all making sense as to what has happened. Although just a little bit of me, a tiny bit, is still not sure which reality I belong to, because I do have a bit of a headache and I'm not supposed to go to sleep with headaches or I'll end up back in my fantasy world. I mean, what kind of crazy shit is that for a dream? How does a brain even come up with that? Story 4. I've frequented this sub a lot recently, and I've never actually posted anything here before, but here goes. My first post, as I was just reminded of it recently. Back in early 2012, I was a sophomore in high school on the lacrosse team. I remember being at practice when one of the seniors was humming a song to himself that sounded familiar, and then goes, "Now you're just somebody that I used to know." I look at him and say, "Wow, I haven't heard that song in years." And I remember he looked at me confused, but naturally didn't say anything, because the song had actually only come out that year. I could remember a rock song that I would sing as a little kid, with those same words and melody to them. I just thought it was weird that this song was suddenly becoming popular again, until I heard it and assumed someone was covering it. Anyway, the song blew up, and a conversation came up with my friends, and I mentioned how I didn't like this version, that it was a cover of a much better song. Of course, everyone looked at me like I was crazy, especially when I was insistent that I had heard the song and used to sing it to myself years before, after they told me that it was a new song and just released this year. I brought it up to my parents, and they both remember me singing and humming those lyrics to myself. Of course, there must have been suggestive questioning here, so they might only be remembering it that way because I brought it up to them, and I was so insistent about it. I was always singing to myself, and I swear one of the lines was, "Now you're just somebody that I used to know," in the same melody that's in the song. It's just bizarre. Maybe Gautier just happened to write a song that was very similar to the one I had made up as a child. Either way, it's always been very uncomfortable to me and makes me feel crazy, and I've never liked the song because of it. It feels like the uncanny valley. It's close to the original version in my mind, but different enough that it bothers me to the point I won't listen to the song. Has anyone else ever heard a new song for the first time and been convinced that they heard it before a long time ago? Story 5. This happened to me when I was 18 or 19 years old. I'm 33 now. I was hanging out at my buddy's house, smoking weed and drinking. 2 of my close friends were also there. These 2 guys decided to take a bunch of acid and offered me some. I declined, as I had to wake up early for work. They took their acid and proceeded to space out and listen to Skinny Puppy for the rest of the night. That shit isn't my cup of tea, so I decided to head out. I went home and fell asleep pretty soon after. During the night, I started having this very realistic and very disturbing nightmare. I was being chased by demons, and I was terrified. The demons were chasing me, and I was screaming for my friends to save me. What set this dream apart was that the demons caught me, and they started tearing me apart, and all of my senses were firing. I could hear the tearing, I could smell the blood, and I could feel everything. The dream only ended when my head was ripped off. I woke up terrified and immediately looked at my clock. It was 3:27 a.m. Remember that. The next day I went back over to my buddy's house and both of them were still there. I mentioned the dream and explained it exactly as I've done here. Both of my friends looked horrified, and I swear one was about to cry. This is what happened after I left. They continued to space out and listen to Skinny Puppy after I left. At some point, one friend asked the other what time it was. He told him it was 3:28 a.m. Then both of them spaced out for what they felt must have been 30 to 45 minutes. During this time, both of them claimed to have had visions of me being chased by demons and eventually getting ripped apart as I screamed for them to help. They both came back to reality after my head was torn off. Then, one friend asked the other friend what time it was. It was 3:26 a.m. To this day, I get chills when I think about it, and the friends I still talk to won't talk about it. Story 6. In mid-July, I learned that the sister of my closest childhood friend had passed away tragically. I'm going to refer to the sister as O and my childhood friend as N. In elementary school, we often hung out together, and although O was an older teen and often annoyed by us, some of my best memories were spent with her, especially the 3 of us. Due to college and personal stressors, N and I had drifted apart over the past 3 years after nearly a decade of intense friendship. On July 5th, I felt a deep sense of sadness I couldn't shake off. I thought I was hungover from the previous night, and that was affecting my mood. I spent all night listening to my music library on shuffle, which is around 12,000 songs, and I could barely focus on anything that played. Suddenly, The Drowning Man by The Cure comes on. I've maybe heard this song once, if ever. I just happen to have the album Faith because a close pal of mine absolutely adores the band. I felt incredibly drawn to this song, and it was all I could listen to for the next week and a half. I even put it on my phone and listened to it during my lunch breaks at work. Here are the lyrics, because it's relevant to the rest of my story. She stands 12 feet above the flood. She stares alone across the water. The loneliness grows and slowly fills her frozen body, sliding downwards. One by one, her senses die. The memories fade and leave her eyes, still seeing worlds that never were, and one by one, the bright birds leave her. Starting at the violent sound, she tries to turn. The final noiseless slips and strikes her soft dark head. The water bows, receives her, and drowns her at its ease. I would have left the world all bleeding. Could I only help you, love? The fleeting shapes so many years ago, so young and beautiful and brave. Everything was true. It couldn't be a story. I wish it was all true. I wish it couldn't be a story. The words all left me lifeless, hoping, breathing like the drowning man. Oh, Fushia, you leave me, breathing like the drowning man, breathing like the drowning man. On July 15th, I receive a text from another old friend of mine, who grew up with O and N as well, telling me that she's found out that O has passed away. I was absolutely shattered and extremely anxious, because I didn't know how, where, and exactly when she had died. My now nearly non-existent friendship with N made it difficult to even conceive an appropriate way to ask these questions. I couldn't just text or call her and ask these things. She was grieving and we didn't have that connection anymore. The memorial service was held about a week or two after I was informed of her passing. The pamphlets given out at the service showed O's portrait and her birthday and the date of her death. She had apparently passed away on July 5th, days before I ever knew, and the same night I became obsessed with the drowning man. I also learned from one of O's oversharing but well-meaning relatives the details of her death. Honestly, I wish I never had. I wasn't emotionally prepared in the slightest. However, it's important to tell you all that this relative said O had passed out and drowned in her bathtub after celebrating the 4th of July. Obviously now, you can see the connection. I listened to the song again when I got home because I was still obsessed, and then it all hit me. This isn't the first time I've had this happen to me. However, the other stories happened when I was younger. I'm 22 now, and I wanted to respect this subreddit's policies about posting childhood stories since I'm new to Glitch in the Matrix. If you'd like to also hear these stories, please let me know. Story 7. I've worked in a hospital for a few years now. It's just for a service department, so it's nothing fancy. About a year into my employment here, I saw an older man seemingly appear out of nowhere on several occasions. It was a Saturday afternoon, so the halls were mostly deserted. I was walking down a long, empty corridor looking straight ahead. I wasn't looking around or tired or even thinking of anything else. My full attention was on the hall in front of me. And around the halfway point, a man just appeared in the hall in front of me. There were no doors nearby, and the other end of the hall was 30 feet behind him, so he couldn't have just walked up without me noticing. The hall was empty, and then, pop, a guy standing there. He looked just as confused as I was, as if he had no idea where he was. He was a relatively tall, 60-year-old man, clean-shaven, with a comb-over. He had khaki pants, a pastel red and yellow pinstriped dress shirt, and a clipboard. We made eye contact for a second. He looked past me, behind himself, and at his clipboard before walking past me like nothing happened. The following week, I saw him again. It was a weekday, so things were busier. There's an elevator set back into a little alcove near where I work. I was walking toward it when I heard the ding of the elevator arriving, and then the doors opening. Just before I turned into the alcove, clipboard guy walks out and walks right past me. I turned to catch the elevator before it left, but it wasn't there. The elevator was 3 floors below me. I know this because I could hear the voices of the guys from engineering and hear them offloading something heavy into their workshop. The next day, I got into a stainless steel freight elevator and hit the button for my floor. Just before the door shut, I heard hurried footsteps and the door opened back up. All right, someone wanted to catch a ride. No one was waiting to come in, though. Nothing much at all happened besides the noticeable echoing footsteps walking in and the thump of someone leaning up against the metal wall. The last time I experienced anything like this was a few days later. My hospital has nearly every door hooked up to a button on the wall. I was walking at a good pace and trying to stay out of the way, so I was as close to the wall as I could be. A door was coming up, and I remembered about a half-second too late that I was supposed to hit the switch. While still going forward, I twisted and leaned back a bit to reach the button as I went past. Who else would be behind me than Clipboard Guy? The thing was, he was walking the other way. He was immediately, and I mean 1 or 2 feet behind me, walking at a brisk pace in the opposite direction. In order for him to be there and walking at that speed, he would have had to walk through the same place I did at the same time. I didn't see him ahead of me beforehand, but he was tight to the wall just like I was. The only people I've ever told about this are my wife, my parents, and one close friend. I won't let any of my coworkers know for fear of being branded as the crazy one. If it was just one of these events, I could brush it off as just misremembering what happened. The culmination, though, of 4 unique events, especially the first one, has convinced me that this really is what I saw. This involves objects popping into existence, noises that aren't there, and spatial situations that, well, just can't happen. Again, I could write that off, but it all centers around the same mysterious gentleman that I haven't seen before or since. It still makes me feel uneasy 2 years later. Story 8. I know a fair amount of these stories are feasible to explain and are basic coincidences at most, but hear me out. This may be long, but I was thoroughly disturbed last night at work, and it seems like a glitch for me to even have found this subreddit the day after my experience. Let me just say that I'm known to be a pretty observant guy. All my friends and family who know me even slightly well are aware that I notice everything. It's pretty hard to slip something past me. Not to say I'm proud or a cocky asshole or anything, but it's just a little background about me before you listen to this long-ass story. Thanks. I've worked at this sandwich joint for over 1.5 years. We run a tight-knit crew. I'm a good employee, in good standing with the owner and manager, and I'm a little bit of a night crew manager myself. The restaurant itself is very slow, as we tend to receive maybe 20 to 30 customers within my 6 to 7 hour closing shift. This means that I naturally tend to start conversations with customers. I like to figure out where people work their day jobs, where they went to college, how their lives are, and all that stuff. You could say I get personal, but hey, people like it when you're not just some robotic employee. I even met a dude who went to Berkeley Law School, and he told me a lot about life and school and stuff like that. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I like to talk to people. It gets me through the days, and generally people are pretty damn nice about it. I even have a mini little arsenal of conversation progression. Just headed home after a long day's work, huh? Nice. Where do you work at? Oh, that sounds cool. Did you need a degree for that? Oh, nice. Where'd you go to college? Did you like it there? Most conversations are extended versions of that, and it usually gets interesting hearing about such diverse backgrounds. About a week or so ago, this man came in. I would say early 30s, dark hair, dark features, sweatpants, a Nike sweatshirt, and hood up. It was late at night, say 9:30ish, and I was ready to close this bad boy up and get home, but had another half hour to kill. So I said, screw it, let's start a conversation with the guy. Maybe his dad is like a congressman or something cool. Hell, maybe I'll learn something from him. Holy hell. This guy was creepy as shit. He wouldn't meet my direct eye line. He would talk to me by looking above or between my eyes, and he kept his left hand tucked in the back of his pants waistline. I realize that last sentence is a bit hard to visualize, but the best visual I can give is like when people tuck a gun on the back of their pants. It was like he was clutching a gun. He kept his hand there the entire time. He was looking nervous and reluctant, as most people who commit robberies do. And as the sandwich-making process progressed, I was becoming more and more sure that I was about to be robbed. He asked for a ham sandwich on white bread. The way we lay the ham is pretty formulaic, but due to his creepy demeanor, I was admittedly feeling nervous. The 8 slices of ham ended up being folded over at different ratios, laid on top of each other sloppily, and didn't look like too appetizing of a sandwich. The man asked for Swiss cheese. The formula calls for 4 slices, so, as I always do, I picked up a stack of the triangularly cut cheese and fan it out in such a way where I can grab 4 and throw the rest back into the pile. I lay the cheese in a less than orderly fashion, and the sandwich is still clearly missing its picture perfectness that you see on TV. These details may seem irrelevant, but I just want you to know the gist of it. You'll see why. The man asked if I could toast his sandwich. This means I would have to turn my back on him for a few seconds to throw it in the toaster. I was running a lot of shit through my mind, and I was not prepared to turn my back on him. This caused a mini sort of panic, and I grabbed his sandwich and attempted to stand in such a way where I could keep my eye on him with my waist twisted enough to get the sandwich in and toasted, but still be looking at him. As you may have guessed, I dropped it. I dropped the sandwich. I made a basic attempt to catch it as it fell, kind of like flared my knee up and tried to use my waist as a sort of cushion to hold up my elbow to catch the sandwich, but to no avail. I was panicking hardcore. Splat. In the few seconds before I looked up, I was bracing myself for a very angry creep staring at me. But he was gone. He left. He vanished. I didn't even hear the squeak of the door, the footsteps, nothing. I ran outside. I looked left and right, looked left again, and no cars were driving away. No cars were even remotely parked close enough for him to be hiding in or behind. He was just gone. The sandwich was still on the ground, fallen face down. One of the triangles of cheese landed in just a perfect angular contrast with the tiles of the floor. Of the 8 pieces of ham on the sandwich, 6 were left betwixt the bread and the floor, while 2 pieces flew off and landed adjacent to the cabinet on top of which the toaster is located. Fast forward to last night. A man much older than the first comes in. I would say 60s, white hair, dark features, probably 6'6". He was probably the tall, dark, and handsome type dude in the 70s or something. Pretty nice man, up until he started ordering a sandwich. I got chills typing that last sentence because I have no idea how to proceed with the story. It just gets unsettling for me. He ended up asking for white bread. I started to carry on my casual conversation. "How's your night going, sir? Just getting off work?" The man answered with a stern affirmative and offered no other information. Okay, clearly this guy didn't want to talk about anything other than his sandwich. Weird. "What kind of sandwich for you, sir?" "Ham." "Alright. Pretty stern guy. No nonsense. Maybe he's like in the mafia or some shady shit and he got nervous when I asked about work. Alright, fine. Let me make your sandwich and you can get out of here, man." He then reaches behind his waist in the exact same fucking way the first guy did. I swear to God, the gesture and motion were the exact same smoothness, timing, and form. He kept his hand there the exact same way the other guy did about a week ago. The same way. Everything started eerily coming back to me now. It was like the most jolting deja vu moment I'd ever had, and honestly, I thought it was just that. Deja vu. But wait, there's more. The way I ended up laying the ham looked very, very familiar. The distance between each slice, the way each layer peeled off in the stack of ratio to the next, the way the slices folded over. I can honestly swear to you, I was building the exact same fucking sandwich that I built just a week ago. I was having one of those moments where a bunch of shit just passes through your mind all at once, and it's actually kind of surprising how many thoughts you can have in such a short amount of time. But I remember telling myself to take the risk and just reach for the Swiss because I had a feeling. How did you know I wanted Swiss? I was taken aback. The guy actually wanted Swiss. How in the world do I pass it off as a lucky guess? Well, exactly how you'd think. Lucky guess, I uttered as I let out a meager, pathetic little chuckle. The man proceeded to say the most spine-chilling thing I ever heard. I read stories on Reddit about paranormal or weird shit happening to people. There's actually an Ask Reddit thread about it right now. I see variations of the quote, chill down my spine, and have never really experienced that. Well, I experienced it last night. The man looks at me as if I told him I knew the winning lottery number for the next win. Very inquisitive look. A very, very strong sense of passion in his words when he said this. No. Seems like you've done this before. He just called out my déjà vu. He just confirmed that he was aware of my déjà vu. At this point, the phrase time traveler just made its first entrance into my mind. I looked at him with the most ridiculously awestruck impression. I sat there staring at him for a good 5 seconds before I laid the cheese. It was a surreal moment. It was like the climax of this confrontation had already happened, but I still needed to lay the cheese and veggies, roll the sandwich up, and then ring him in at the register. How much creepier is this gonna get? I just didn't get it. I picked up the cheese in the exact same way I always do. Fan out the top 4 slices and lay them down. I was looking down at the same sandwich I had built a week prior. And I swear to you, the cheese, the bread, the ham, everything was uncannily similar. I credit myself to be a rational dude, so at this point I was just calling it déjà vu and not trying to feel disturbed. The man said, just lettuce and mayo, no toast. Not toasted. Thank the good Lord. He didn't want it toasted. This fucking déjà vu is over and it's all just a coincidence, right? Well, some of you may not know, but there's this thing called a hot food tax in some places. Therefore, when a sandwich is toasted, there's a button for hot food taxation, and it's something like 12 cents. So as a force of habit, I read the order back to the customer in this fashion. Alright, sir. So a ham sandwich, not toasted, with a bag of chips and 2 cookies? He looks very concerned with why I mentioned that it wasn't toasted. Why did you have to specify that it's not toasted? Then I explained to him what I said above, about the hot food tax and all that. Force of habit, because if a sandwich is toasted, you repeat the order like, alright, a ham sandwich toasted with the chips and a drink, or something like that. After explaining that to him, he was just kinda inquisitive about it. Nothing too weird. I didn't want to keep him any longer, so I took his card, swiped it, and could not wait for him to get the fuck out. As he walked out the door, he looked back at me with the creepiest smile you can ever conceive in your Reddity imaginations. He turns around and says, honestly, something I don't think I'll ever forget. Just to let you know, I didn't not toast the sandwich because of the tax. I'm not that much of a cheap bastard. Okay, the guy's trying to lighten the mood, right? Sweet. Yeah, I know he's not a cheap bastard. I mean, it's 12 cents. But he felt the need to tell me the real reason he didn't get it toasted. I just didn't want you to drop it. And just like that, he was gone. This was without a doubt the most spine-chilling thing I've ever experienced. I explained this whole thing to my father, and he came up with the idea that these 2 men were probably father and son, and were just fucking with me, and I'm making up the rest of the details in my head. Impossible. Do you know why? The man who owns the restaurant I work at owns one other, just one other, halfway across town. When Guy 1 came in, I was at a store that was about 8 miles away from the store Guy 2 came in. The realistic chances of these 2 men knowing each other and tracking me down, finding me across town, and fucking with me like this is impossible. I, and 3 other employees, are the only 4 employees that jump between the 2 stores. The chances of this being a planned and methodical prank is absolutely outrageous. I have no idea what I experienced, but if you actually took the time to listen to all of this, please tell me if this is a legit glitch in the Matrix. Story 9. In high school, I became close friends with a girl in my choir class. At the time, she was working evenings at a nursing home, and she was dating a guy, we'll call him Juan, who also worked at the nursing home. Juan was born in Mexico, but came to the United States as a kid. All of his family still lived in Mexico. Around Christmas, our school choir did a lot of free concerts for the public. This year, we just so happened to be doing a concert at the same nursing home where my friend worked. I was so excited because I would finally be meeting her boyfriend. Unfortunately, my friend said, Juan was going to be visiting his mom back in Mexico for Christmas, and he'd be gone by the date of our recital. Won't be meeting him after all, I thought. Now, the day of the concert arrives, and we're all at the nursing home getting our song on, and from where I'm positioned, I have a clear view into the doorway that leads to the kitchen. As I'm singing, at some point I notice a Hispanic-looking guy standing in the doorway watching us. He had a baseball cap on with a very distinctive logo. At the same time that this is occurring, I was extremely strange feeling. This wave of nausea and dizziness just came over me, and I thought I might pass out. The Hispanic guy goes back into the kitchen, and the sick feelings went away immediately. After the concert, I pull my friend aside. I thought you said Juan wasn't going to be here today. Yeah, he's not. He's in Mexico. He's been there for a couple of days. No, he's not, because I just saw him. I go on to describe him, which may have sounded like a generic description of a Hispanic guy. Tan, dark hair, dark eyes, etc. Had it not been for the hat with that distinct logo. My friend verified that that's indeed the hat he wears every day to work. He's also the only Hispanic guy that works there, so it couldn't be a misidentification. At this point, I feel kind of bad for my friend because this guy clearly lied to her about going to Mexico. Then she tells me she was the one who dropped him off at the airport. Then, to completely quell any further disbelief, my friend goes and gets the manager and asks if Juan is working today. No, he's in Mexico until January 1st, didn't he tell you? I've always been kind of sensitive to strange things, but this is beyond anything that I've ever done. I have literally no explanation, and whenever I'd bring it up, my friend would be like, "Can we please not talk about that?" Story 10. I'll start by saying that I'm a nursing student and hospice worker, so that you understand how I know how prescribing works. Keep that in mind. I have chronic back pain, and finally, after years of suffering, I went to a pain clinic. I was prescribed 2 medications. One was a med for nerve pain, and the other was a high-strength anti-inflammatory. I took them for a few months and ran out of the anti-inflammatory, but my pain was so much better that I never bothered to get the med refilled, and eventually I lost the bottle and prescription number. Flash forward to about a week ago. My pain was getting unbearable again, and I was kicking myself for not refilling my other prescription, so I called the doc, asking for a new prescription, but according to their records, I was only ever prescribed the nerve blocker. So I called my parents bitching about how they lost or never properly charted my prescription for the anti-inflammatory, and my parents said, "You were never on an anti-inflammatory, just the one medication." I was shocked. I have vivid memories of setting up my pill regimen with 2 medications. I know I was on 2. Now, there are clearly times when you're given 2 meds but only prescribed refills for 1. Those of you who have also been under general anesthesia would know this. They prescribe you a pain med, and they also send you home with a couple pills for nausea if you need them. This was not one of those instances. I had 2 prescriptions. I filled 2 meds at the pharmacy. I had 2 pill bottles. I scheduled a reevaluation with my pain doc because, well, regardless of the craziness, I was still in pain. At the office, I casually asked her, "Hey, I was wondering, would the medication I remember being on be something we could try?" She thinks for a minute and says, "You know, we probably should have prescribed you for that the first time."